On to YouTube.
Thank you a ton. Thanks a
No
lot.
problem. So how do you all like Linux until now? Any
Getting better at
issues?
it.
Any complaints?
Kind of getting better at it like every day.
Nice. Yeah, see, trust me, it'll actually get better and better. Okay, so Munjal has just joined in, so let me let him know this too. Hey Munjal,
Hi, sorry for the wait.
uh, yeah, no problem. So we were actually discussing something. So for the next 1 week, we would actually do
Okay,
a crash course in what has already been done. Okay. The
okay,
reason for that is it's more of a refresher course. That's it. Okay. If there are any doubts that you all have until now, okay, next week would
okay,
be the week where we revisit what has already been done. Okay. And I would actually
okay,
strongly
okay,
suggest for you all to do whatever you all want to do and come up with doubts or probably try it parallelly. Okay. The reason for that is we'll be covering OOP today and
okay,
tomorrow, and for next 1 week we'll just do a quick refresher, just so that once we get
okay,
into the more complex stuff, nobody should feel left out. Okay.
okay,
Yeah, so all the basic fun stuff would be done by tomorrow. The next 1 week would be refresher, and after that comes the advanced stuff. Okay.
okay.
Perfect. So now let me go to the document route. So looks like 22nd was the last one. So let's see what happened on 22nd. Okay, so we did discuss about files and file upload callback. It looks like we've done a good amount of research and application on how to work with file uploads. Perfect. So let's actually take a look one last time as to what happened that day. Okay. So looks like we have worked with file size, we have worked with allowed formats, and have worked with nested conditionals as to how we would check with file uploads. Okay. And in here we have also like kind of tried to understand what is in the file array, and yeah, at the end we have also visited the php.ini file for all kinds of static file conditions. Today let's actually take a step laterally and take a look at more basic stuff. Okay, now this one would be so let's call it visibility dot php. And this topic should fairly be simple, probably 15 to 20 minutes, not long. We've already seen functions. So it's function, I'll say my function, and I would say $a is equal to 10, echo $a. We have seen this. So let me quickly, I mean, again, I probably wouldn't even have to get it out onto the web page. Okay, if I print it, we would get 10. Another variant of a function that we've seen is where we would say $a is equal to 20. I would actually pass in $a. Okay, and if I print this out onto the page, okay, at that point it is going to be 20 because we are actually not 20 exactly. So over here I'll have to pass $a, and at that point it would actually print $20. Now let's actually try something weird. Okay, let's say we'll do this. Okay, let's actually pull up the browser. So it'll be training.com visibility.php. Nothing showed up. Oh yeah, I have to make the function call. The So now it is 10, right? But one thing that we'll have to understand here is I actually have $a over here and then $a in here. The question would be, it actually printed dollar it actually printed 10. So any person who will actually look at it would understand that, oh wait, this is on line 3, this is on line 7, so this might be overriding this one. So let's even try that. Okay, let's try this. Let's say var dump $a. Okay, so at that point it would say that it is a null value. Okay, and it would say undefined variable a is being used on line 7. Okay, and after that it prints a again because we are initializing it. Okay, now the reason that this variable a was not available in here was because my function is only looking for local values. So I guess I have a question. It's cause is a local variable. We didn't it's cause is a local variable for function and we called function, we didn't print a. Yeah, yeah. So the reason for that is this is outside the function and it's not inside the function. So the point that I actually am trying to make is there are local variables and then there are global variables. Okay, now see, I would always strongly suggest not using global variables, but there are certain times when a variable has to be global. Okay, at that point the question might be, oh hang on, how do I use global variables? Okay, so let's actually go to the documentation and let's actually read a little about global variables. Variables, not Python, PHP. Okay, so variable scope. Okay, now though we would actually talk a little bit, but the thing is we'll actually have to use a keyword called global. Okay, so that is the important part. Okay, so I don't see that. Yeah, so right here, so they are saying that they're talking about the global keyword. Okay, here. Okay, so this is important for us to keep in mind. So just like any other function, if we want to access $a in here so that the value is not null and we don't get this warning, okay, or notice, we'll have to do one thing. We will have to say global $a. Okay, and then if we do a var dump of $a, okay, let us see what happens here. The point would be int 20. Okay, and let me quickly go back to my editor for 1 second. Okay, here, okay, it is still 20. okay, then it comes into the function. Okay, here I'm saying global dollar a var dump a, okay, and then I'm actually resetting it to 10, and then dollar a is being printed. Now let's actually look at something other than that. Let's actually print it after the function, just to see if the global value was overridden. Okay, see, because here we started with global a, then it printed 20, then we overrode dollar a, okay, with 10, okay, then we have echoed it, then it became 10. Now we are outside the function. Let's actually print it out and see if it is 10 or 20. And in the meantime, let me add a few breaks so that it's more legible. I don't think more legible is a word, but never mind. So one important thing that we'll have to all understand is global variables, okay, technically do not have a value by reference and parameter by value and parameter by reference kind of a analogy. Okay, if you override them, you override them. Okay, it is not for a regular copy. When you override a global variable, you override for everybody. So that is the I don't know, that is a, you could say, power, or you could say something different, but that is the whole concept of a global variable. Once you touch it, you touch it. Okay, it is permanent. Okay, so now that is the first concept of visibility of variables. Okay, so now that we understand the concept of visibility, let's actually quickly change tracks and then talk about something different. File import is another thing. Okay, so the reason that we are discussing these two, which are which might seem off topic, is we would be using these two concepts in object oriented programming. So that is why we are using these. Now you all might think, what exactly do I mean by file importing? So here when I say file, I don't want you all to think that it is going to be a read file and writing something to a file and all that magic. This is where we are only looking for an external library, or we are only looking for an external PHP file which has a certain functionality, and we are importing that functionality. That is it. Okay, so if we want to, or just for example, so let's actually create a base file. Let's call it base file. All this has is function. I'll have to open up my PHP, close it. So let's say it has some mathematic functions, or let's say print name. Okay, I would say, I would take a name and I would say, or let's just say echo hello dollar name. Okay, and then I would say hello, no, function, I don't know, get time. Okay, I I would say echo time. I forget these things, so I guess it's YMD. Okay, so yeah, so good enough. So these two functions are good enough for the example. Okay, so now let's actually do this, and let's go back to file import. Now assume that file import needs the functionalities of base file. At that point, it is not correct to go back quickly and like copy all the stuff and then paste it in here. It is wrong. So the way we'll handle that situation is, there are four cases. Okay, I'll talk about four of them and give you examples as to when to use it. So the first one is include, the second one is include once, the third one is require, and the fourth one is require once. So in my opinion, it is kind of redundant, okay, to have include ones and require ones, and I'll give you the reason why. So what include does is it includes a file and throws a warning, okay, throws a warning if the file doesn't exist. Okay, so let's actually comment all these out and try that. Okay, if I say include file not there dot php, okay, and then I would say echo 100. Okay, so now I'll have to let me copy this file real quick. Let me go to the browser. So I paste it here. Hang on, sys 10. Ah, I have to give my statement terminator as well as. So, so let me actually add, what is it, a line break so that it's easier to read. Okay, so what happened here is, what include does is it actually looks for a file and it would say that this file, okay, it looks for a file in the same level of in the or in the same directory. Okay, so that is why it says that there is no file that is present in this directory with that name, and then after that it actually also looks in the other include paths that we have, so or other paths that you already given in the php.ini file, and nowhere was the file found. It throws the warning and goes to the next step. Okay, it doesn't stop the execution of the program, so that is the takeaway. Okay, the next thing is include underscore ones. If you actually check this, there is going to be no real difference or no real visible difference. Let me put it that way. Okay, so now let me go back in here and refresh it. It would still say the same thing. But if somebody asks you what is the difference between include and include ones, the biggest difference is going to be how much memory would each of them take. Now, if I say if I do that, the file is only going to be included once. Okay, it wouldn't be included 4 times. But if I say include only, you would actually include each of them 4 times. Okay, so it is more of a memory waste. So by using include ones, you are actually saving memory. Okay, so that is the difference between include and include ones. Now let's actually take a look at require and see what happens here. Or let me leave it like that and comment it out, and I would say require file not the dot php. Okay, they're, they're pretty much the same syntax. Now let's go in here, let's refresh it. But here what happened here was, the first warning was that the file was not there, but the next warning is, since it's required, it means that we cannot go forward. Okay, the only difference between include and require is, include would say that if it is there, it's good, let's use the functionality and go to the next step, but if it's not there, screw that, we would still go to the next functionality. But when we work with require, it is set on stone, it's hardly written saying that if I do not have this, which means that I am throwing a fatal error and we'll have to leave it at this point. Okay, So that is why you wouldn't see that the echo statement was ever, so you have never got to the echo statement, while in include you have gone to the echo statement. And again, require once is very similar to, what is it, include once. If you have multiple require onces in different files, at that point it would only take the file once and not multiple times. So let me refresh it just to show that everything is the same. Now the example that I had given you earlier was where I would say somebody would actually do something similar to this. Now the first question that might pop up into mind is, how dumb can somebody be to require the same file so many times? So this wouldn't actually happen in the real world. Okay, now in the real world what happens is you are working with, I don't know, what is it, hundreds of files. So how would I know that you have required something in a different file? Okay, there are hundreds of files, I am only working with 2 or 3 files, but I need the functionality of file X. Okay, at that point if you have already required file X in some file which is already being loaded, and since I haven't seen it visibly, all I would have to do is, I think that since this one is not being loaded, I would say that I'll load it. Let's load it. At that point PHP is smart enough to say that, okay, this file is already loaded, though I see this, since I have it in memory I wouldn't have to load it another time. Okay, so the best practice is always to use include once and require once to save the memory. Okay, and again we all can discuss how much memory would a single file would take, but the way we will have to look at is, this is going to be a file load per request. Now look at, say, a website, say like facebook.com or Facebook, or even for that matter the one that I work with, uh, docross.com, we would actually be receiving millions of requests, okay, in a few days. At that point memory is very important. Hardware is always important, no problem, but memory, the internal memory, is always going to be very important, because if a computer goes down it is always due to a memory issue. Okay, so that is the basic 101, or like a basic prerequisite for us going into object oriented concepts. At this point let me quickly ask you all if there are any questions with anything that we have discussed. Yeah, I mean, if there are 4 different files, then it would actually include 4 different files. So, I mean, if your question is, so just so I know. Ooh. Okay, if I'm doing that, okay, and if this is file not there 2, 3, and 4, at that point it would obviously load all these files. It wouldn't say that since I have the first one, I wouldn't load the second one. It would load all the files, but it is saying that I would not load the duplicates. Okay, so the duplicates are all these files. Okay, all these files are duplicates of the same file. So it is saying that I am going to manage the memory by not loading duplicate files. But if there is another different file, at that point it would load it. Will it include the first file only or all files once? It would include all files once. Munjal, does that make sense? Okay, perfect. Now let's actually go into the object oriented PHP. So let's actually begin with something called OOP.php. Let's do this. So given that OOP in itself is a beast, let's actually make a directory for OOP. Let's cd into OOP and do whatever we want to do in this folder. Okay, so yeah, let's actually begin with the basics again. Okay, so let's go back to SHIB for a second, so we understand what all we would be dealing with. OOP, PHP. So probably the first question is going to be, originally PHP was not meant to be a object oriented programming language. Okay, it was always meant to be a functional language which can be easily used on the web. Okay, because let's actually look at who the competitors of PHP are. Okay, the competitors of PHP are ASP Classic. Okay, and then we have, see, JSP wasn't really in the picture. Then we have Perl. Okay, and both of these programs are pretty sad. Okay, or even Cold Fusion for that matter. See, all these programs are really sad. Okay, and you cannot do a lot of stuff. So that is why PHP was originally introduced and developed, and that is why people also started liking PHP. But then we actually had Microsoft coming up with ASP.NET, okay, which was powered by the C Sharp framework, okay, or should I say C Sharp programming language and .NET framework, okay. With this, not only were you able to do what you could with ASP Classic, but given the power of C Sharp, you could actually do a lot of programming stuff, a lot of object oriented stuff. I won't say not object oriented, but a lot of programming stuff with the callbacks, okay. And C Sharp in itself being an object oriented language out and out, the whole market kind of started looking at, oh, PHP is not an object oriented language. See, that is how even Python now, because Python 2 was never object oriented, because most of it was supposed to be scripting. But people have actually bullied beautiful languages like PHP and Python into object oriented programming. Not that it's bad, but it's just the fact. Okay. Then Java came up with Java and JSP. Okay. And then the evolution actually started where we have Spring and Spring with .NET. We have Silverlight, or even before Silverlight, we would actually have WPF, WCF, and then we would have Silverlight, and all these fancy things. Okay, so it kind of became important for PHP to develop too. So PHP up to 5 was never a complete, was never an object oriented language. It was partially object oriented with PHP 5.1 and 5.1 major releases, but from PHP 5.2 and now 5.3, okay, PHP is considered to be an object oriented language. The only difference though is PHP still keeps its variables open unless they are in a class, okay. But unlike say C sharp, okay, unlike C sharp, you would never have a variable x which can be a string, okay. If I actually do this, see, you can still do this in .NET 4.5 because they have understood the power of what is it, runtime data typing. That's why they've actually come up with this in .NET 4.5. But before that, we weren't able to use this, okay. But yeah, long story short, PHP is one of those languages where if it is outside the class, we can actually do ABC, and then we can do $C is equal to 12.000. Okay, we wouldn't have to do this string. Yeah, we wouldn't have to do this. Okay, it's too much work. Okay, but with object oriented PHP, we would have to do that. Okay, only if it is in the class. Now that we are talking about classes, let's actually look at what exactly defines OOP. So I believe there are 4 pillars of OOP. If anybody asks you Probably this should be your answer as to what defines OP. I believe the first one is abstraction, the second one is inheritance, the third one is polymorphism, and I'm guessing the fourth one is encapsulation. Encapsulation. Or should I put this in the beginning and this at the end? Yeah, so this would actually make more sense and would actually follow this pattern. So now the first question is going to be, what exactly do I mean by encapsulation? Okay, when we write a function or when we write a library, okay, let's say that we are actually writing a library. What we have, say, is an application which actually calculates the sum, or we have a math library, let's put it that way. Okay, if we would do that via what is it, functional PHP, the only problem that one can see is, okay, I would say, I don't know, math.php. Okay, at that point I would have function a, which is, or function add, okay, and I would have to write something. I would say function subtract, and I'll have to write something, and so on. And then I'll have to require math.php, and I'll have to call add by itself. Okay, but I can never say that, okay, add, subtract, multiply, and divide would be part of class basic math, and then I cannot actually say that all the other complex stuff is of a different class. So I'm not able to assign functions based on a virtual entity. At this point I'm only using a logical or a physical entity, which is going to be math.php, which is the file name. Okay, but assuming that I want to group all my functions by their functionality and assign them to a functional concept, that is where encapsulation or classes come in. So now let's actually look at classes. Let's say class.php. Classes are pretty simple. Okay, in PHP you would just say class, mm, class name. Okay, so this pretty much is the class. Okay, so we're not doing anything fancy. Okay, all we would do is we would just start with a class. Okay, and then we would give a class name, and whatever is inside the class belongs to this class. Okay, so that is how we are encapsulating, something into a class. Now let's actually see, what do I mean by encapsulation, or like what are we encapsulating into it. Okay, the first answer for that would be, or like there are two things that will encapsulate. One is going to be properties, the other is going to be methods. Okay, properties are nothing complex or nothing that we've already seen. Properties are just variables. Okay, methods would be the functions that we've already seen. And see, again, in PHP there is no real difference between a function and a method. Okay, because in object oriented languages, I'm guessing that function has a return type and a method has no return type, so it is going to be void. So that is the only real difference. So we can actually see, we can even call these methods, so it doesn't make a real difference. Okay, so let's talk about properties here. Now what exactly are properties? Properties are going to be, I don't know, name of the class. Okay, and then properties are going to be, what do you want to do? I don't know, time when the class was created, or like time when the object or an instance of class was created, and then username, the person who's actually creating the class. Now the first the first question is going to be, okay, I can actually I can actually I know that this class has name, time and username. The question is going to be, how do I set the name and how do I get the name, right? And what can I do with the name and time and username? For that we'll have to get into the class methods. Okay, so let's actually write one method very similar to what we have already done, and we will say cl function. Okay, and let's say print dollar name, dollar time, dollar username. Okay, now we have already seen the concept of local versus global variables. Okay, that obviously is going to apply even in a class. So when I actually, okay, so let me actually replace print with echo. Okay, so class name, yeah. so I have name, time and username, and I'm actually printing this data out. And I was talking about, is this going to be visible? Are these variables going to be visible inside the function, inside a class method? Just as global variables, again, these variables, though are part of the class, they wouldn't be visible to the class methods directly. And the reason for that is we are allowing functions or the methods inside the class to have their own variables. So the way we access class variables inside a function is going to be via this dollar. This would actually say that we are getting the class variables. Okay, so now we are saying echo this name, this time, this username, as simple as that. Okay, so now let's actually find a way as to how we can actually create or like even initialize or like give a value to this property. The way we would do that is, again, think about class as an encapsulated concept. Okay, and concepts have to be applied. The way we apply a concept is via the object. Okay, so the object instantiation in PHP is this way, where I would say object is equal to new class name. Okay, so now I've actually created the object. So let's actually do this. Let's actually use the powerful var dump and see what exactly is the deal with this class. Okay, this is going to be class.php, and since it is part of OOP, it has to be class.php like this. Perfect. I actually have an error on line 6, expecting t function. Okay, why? So let's actually try this and see if something happens. I mean, ignore this public for a bit. Okay, see if that makes a difference. Yeah, so I'll actually talk about public, just ignore it for now. Okay, so now let's actually do a refresh. So this is the application of the concept class name. Okay, the way we apply the concept is by creating an object for that concept. Okay, and that concept actually gives us three things: name, time, and username. Okay, so now let's actually give some values to it and see what happens. The way the way we would actually let's leave this thing here, let's call it um, before instantiation. Then let's actually have a break, and then the way we instantiate a property is via the arrow symbol. We would say object, arrow symbol, and then we would say name is okay psi. Then the time is going to be, let's say, time. Okay, time is the function, and since we want a format, let's do this, and the final one is going to be dollar username, and let's say admin user. Okay, and then again, okay, okay, undefined variable 27. Right. Yeah, so at this point it would actually give us the values. Okay, now here the values were null. Now it actually feels better, but for some reason I'm actually getting a Unix timestamp. So I'm guessing that the format that I've given, I've actually screwed something up in the format. See, again, I don't think that the format is wrong. You know what? I guess it's date. Yeah, it's date. So let's actually do a quick refresh and see that changes. Yeah, yeah, okay. And let me actually modify the property too, because we are capturing the date and not the time. Okay, so at this point date is null and the other properties are null too, and here we are saying that the name is Sai, the username is admin user, and the hang on, it is still time. Oh yeah, the reason for that is date. That's a beautiful error. So what I've done here is I've done this. Okay, I do not have a property, okay, of time. Okay, I do not have a property of time, but when I refresh my object, okay, i'm st I'm still getting a time property. Okay, which pretty much is a security hack, right? Because if a user comes in and starts giving in their own properties, the system is going to be screwed. How do we avoid this would be the next step. Okay, but for now let me go in quickly and show you all, or like rename this real quick, but we'll talk about it for sure. Okay, let's quickly go and refresh. So here we have name, date, username, name, date, username. So that is how we give a value to it. But how do I get the data out? Okay, the way I would get the data out is either by using this function, or I could just say echo, right, dollar object date. Okay, okay, that point it would give me the actual date. Okay, So this is how you set and get the properties. Okay, so the next question would be, now that we have set and get a property, let's also retrieve data, or like retrieve a method. The easy way for that is, again, it's very similar. All we would do is we would just call in the function, that's it. Okay, where we would say, perfect, so it says undefined property time. Okay, yeah, the reason for that is I should have actually changed this here, which I did not. Okay, and here it would actually give me what I'm looking for. Okay, so this is like a basic introduction of classes, objects, properties and methods. At this point, let me ask you all if there are any questions. Good. Since there are no questions, let's actually go to the next step. The next step is going to be, should the user really give us a date? Come on, we already have the date. Okay, at that point, why not give the date right here? Okay, I would say date, what is it, ymd. See, okay, technically again what happens is, we could directly give the name here. Okay, and we can actually avoid these two steps. Okay, but there is going to be one thing that will fail. Okay, the first thing that is going to work fine is going to be this part, but the second thing is going to fail. Can anybody give a have a blind guess as to why the second thing would fail? Any guess just to keep you all involved. That is what I'm looking for. Any blind guess? Hmm. So the reason that it would fail is, we are retrieving a value at runtime. Okay, and class variables cannot be initialized. Okay, if a value is retrieved at runtime. Now, but we still do not want the user to input the date. The way we would handle that is via a magic method. Okay, the magic method is going to be called construct. Okay, in the magic method, what we will do is, as soon as an object is instantiated, okay, we would say set the date. Okay, so that is how we would instantiate an object at runtime. Okay, if we cannot instantiate it directly. Okay, here we are instantiating the property directly, or we are setting an initial value, and when we try to set an initial value to this property via a function that is going to be executed at runtime, the property or the class will not be able to take it. The reason is, since it doesn't know the value, it wouldn't be able to have a static initialization. Okay, so to avoid that issue, what we would do is, we would actually use a concept called constructor. So the first and foremost program that actually runs when a class, okay, is used and when an object is instantiated is the constructor. So that is why, as soon as the object is instantiated, we would be setting in the date. So that is one way of handling data. Okay, so now let's actually, now we are not setting date and the name, but we would still have the data printing as always, since we are instantiating it directly. let's take a look at it. See, when we print the object before instantiation, okay, before direct instantiation, even before that we already have the name and the date, and the only reason for that is we are using static instantiation for name and runtime instantiation via the constructor for this guy, okay. And the way we can check that the constructor is working is by going in here and we would say echo init. See, I mean, if it's Python, it is the constructor is going to look like this, okay. So that is the constructor. So that is why a lot of open source programmers kind of switch between constructor and initializer, okay. So let's save it and let's see that init is printed, and init has to be printed even before this text, okay, because the object instantiation takes place here and then it comes over to this line, okay. So init has to be printed before this line. It does, okay. So let me add a break, line break, okay. So init, then we are going for instantiation on runtime, or we are printing what is the data before instantiation, and after that we are printing this data, okay. So now we have taken a look at 5 concepts: classes, objects, methods, properties and constructors. And a concept that swings across all these 5 topics is how we initialize data, okay. Now that we have a good understanding of all these points, let's actually go back to something very simple that I had done before, okay. I had to give a access specifier, that's what we normally call this, okay, public, okay, access specifier to use a variable. And the reason for that is, by default, I mean, I would have liked that PHP classes would have something by default, but it looks like we do not, okay. So we'll have to give a or specify an access specifier when we are creating a class. Now let's understand what exactly is an access specifier and how it changes life, okay. So now let's actually close this program. Let's say access specifiers dot php. Again, let's create a class, say okay, and then we would say public dollar name, okay, is Sai, and then public dollar time, we cannot set time, we have already checked that. Then I would say function underscore constructor, like construct, and then yeah, I guess that's enough. Or let's actually say function get name. See, I really wouldn't need this function, but never mind. I would just say echo dollar this name, okay. Now in here I was supposed to set date and I've given it as time. Let me redo it, okay. And here I would just say the same thing, nothing different. Is going to be date ymd. So at this point I'll have to do dollar access object is equal to new, which actually creates a new instance of access specifier fires. Wait. See, yeah, okay, access specifiers. And I would say dollar access object. I would say okay. So let's actually say echo access object dollar. Oh, that's why we have get name, right? We just say dollar access object get name. Okay. At this point, let me take this and let me actually print it in the browser. Again, nothing fancy. I've recreated the same class that we have, but with lesser functions and lesser parameters. Okay, or lesser properties. Let me go in here. Let me print it. Fair enough. Psi, that is the name that I've given. But now here comes the hacker. Okay, what the hacker guy does is he's going to say var dump dollar access object. See, he's a hacker. All he wants to do is break stuff. Okay, he's going to say interesting. It is supposed to give. Never mind. I'm actually thinking about something different. It's actually called it's something called reflection. Okay, we'll get into it at a very later topic. It actually tells you which methods are public and which methods are not public. So okay, so forget it. So again, the hacker, like I'm saying, has a lot of time on hand. What the guy does is he would just say, let me see if this works. Name is equal to you got screwed. As an example, see, this happens all the time on internet. When somebody hacks your website, you actually see much worse stuff on your website than that. Now let's again do this. Access object get name. Okay, let me add a break. Let's also say no mind, I have to give in a semicolon. See, the name got changed, and the name is supposed to be a property that shouldn't have been touched. That is why we are initializing it, right? That is why we are giving it a default value. So the way we allow only sensitive properties, or like only properties that users have to input, the way we would do that is by making them public, and the other properties have to be shouldn't be public. Okay, and again, so when I say shouldn't be public, there are two concepts to it. So the access specifiers are public, protected, and private. For now, let's only take a look at protected. Okay, now what if I say protected? Okay, again, let me give another line break here. Let's see what happens. See, the first thing that happens here is on line 22. Okay, so psi is already given. Okay, and then the first thing that happens is it just cannot access protected properties, access specifiers dollar name and line 22. Okay, so now let's see what exactly is on line 22. On line 22, what we have is this. is this data, okay, where we are actually trying to set a value to it, okay, and then when we try and set a value to this, we are getting an apt message saying that, listen, you cannot access a protected property, and since you have breached our security, we are throwing a fatal error and we are stopping the execution. So that is how PHP works. But if you just want to take a look at a protected property, let's see if that is possible, okay. So that is why we have the function get name. Let us see if that is possible. See, you are not able to set a value to the protected property. Let's see if you can at least access the property and take a look at it. Yes, you can, and the reason for that is this is only returning a copy of the protected value. It is not really returning the protected value, it is only returning a copy of it. So when we go back to the whole concept of parameter by value and parameter by reference, so here it is not giving you the reference or access to its memory, it is only sharing a copy of it, okay, and you cannot do anything with the copy, okay, you really cannot do anything with the copy, okay. So that is why this works. Now the next question is going to be, listen, I actually have a complex class and they have 1500 different parameters. Oh, properties, sorry. So if I have 1500 parameters and say, I don't know, 70% of them are protected. So would I have, what is it? I don't know, at least like 1100 or 1200 properties or 1100 functions which would say get name, get age, get whatever, and so on? No, the way we will handle that is going to be another set of magic methods, okay. So the first, so just so we know, let me go back to Shrib for a second. So magic methods that we have already looked at is the constructor, okay, and even before we go to our next line, let's also take a look at destructor. Destruct, okay. So constructor is the first thing to happen when an object is created, and destructor is going to be the last thing that would happen. So the concept of destructor comes from other object oriented languages which actually have poor garbage collection, say C++ or what is it, Java, and so on. What you'll have to do is you'll have to empty your memory that has been already used for that object, okay, in the destructor. If not, you will be having memory leaks, okay. But in PHP, in languages like PHP or even in Python, what you can do is you can actually forget about garbage collection because the language is smart enough to handle all that for you, okay. So destructor would only be used if you have any kind of files that you are working with. You open up a file, and if you want to close the link, at that point you would close it. If you open up a connection to the database, or if you open up a connection to say any kind of a web service, at that point you can actually use the destructor for that, but not for memory. The other magic methods that we'll look at is get and set, underscore get and underscore set. Now let's actually take a quick look at the documentation as to how, or like what exactly are these magic methods, okay, and why are they relevant to us. Magic methods, and see, I mean, again, when I actually Google something, I want you to pay attention to the keywords, okay. So these are going to be very very important to you whenever you're trying anything, trust me, okay. So yeah, so in here there are a lot of magic methods. So right here we have constructor, destructor, call static, and so on, but the ones that we are going to work at least today are construct, destruct, get, and set, okay. Now let's look at get, and let's actually read some documentation as to, hang on, why we would use get. See, it says get is utilized for reading data from inaccessible properties, okay. Get is used for uh, is utilized for reading data from inaccessible properties. Okay, so the question is going to be, now that we are back in here, okay, rather than me doing get name, let me actually open up like add another property which is protected, dollar age. Okay, in here, rather than me saying get name, get age and get whatever, I can remove all this code and I would just say function underscore underscore get dollar name echo this of dollar name. See, I'm guessing that this has to work. See, returning is going to be another issue, but let's echo and see if that works. I would say dollar, and let's also perform some due diligence. I know, man. Okay, so let's actually say access object dollar age, and we'll have to return it for sure. Okay, let's see what happens here. Earlier, or even let's just say, and just so we do not confuse ourselves with this thing, let's just call it property. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just calling the I'm just saying that I'm just like invoking, probably that is the right term, invoking the magic method, and I'm just saying that I'll pass in a property, take the property and look if that property exists in this class. If it does, give me the value back. Okay, and then I'm saying I'm initializing the new object and I'm echoing a property. Okay, let's see what happens here. Let's go back to the page. See, at that point it is returning the data fine. Okay, then I would also say name yeah, dollar or name. Okay, that point it has to, oh hang on, what just happened here? Did I, was I looking for name before? I thought I was looking for age. Okay, so let's actually look for age now that we already have the name. Let's look for age and see if that goes through too. Yeah, see, that goes through too. So, and will it work for public properties? Probably that would be the next question. Okay, and we'll let us print the date. See, even that works. So underscore underscore get can be used for any property. Now the next question is going to be this prop or dollar prop. It is going to be this dollar prop. The reason for that is, okay, so before that, that's a nice question. Let's actually take a look at, let's quickly digress and take a look at another concept. I'll call it variable variable dot php. Oh, okay, how to say vi. Now what I've said here is, see, I'm actually calling this file variable variable for a reason, for a reason. Okay, dollar a is going to be what's up, and dollar b is going to be okay, I'm low on battery, give me 1 second. Okay, now I'll say I'm just saying, so let's actually say yeah, let's actually say dollar a, and then let's say dollar b. Okay, and then I could even say dollar b. Okay, when I say dollar b, or let's say a. Okay, so at that point echo dollar b. See, again, bear with me, this might be a little confusing, but it would make sense. Okay, so let's copy this. So let's again take a look at what just happened. I'm saying dollar a is equal to what's up. I'm echoing dollar a, and then I'm saying that dollar b is equal to character a, nothing complex, and then I'll actually print out dollar b, and then I'm saying what is dollar b. Okay, and at that point, okay, so I'll have to change the URL, right? See, let me actually add a little space. Is so there's more understanding. Now dollar a is what's up, dollar b is a, the string or the character, and when I'm printing it out, when I'm printing dollar b, it is what's up, and the reason for that is, let me go back to my editor. When I'm printing dollar b, it is going to say dollar b. Okay, and then dollar b. Dollar b is a, then we said since dollar b is a, it would be replaced by a, and dollar a is what's up, so that's why what's up is printed. So that is the concept of variable. Okay, are there any questions here? Any questions? No questions? Perfect. So the reason that I've quickly digressed from OOP into this one is Nirajan asked me a question here. Okay, asked me a question here, if it is going to be prop or it is going to be dollar prop. Okay, because here I'm not saying access object dollar date, but I'm just saying date, while here I'm saying dollar prop, and the simple reason for that is dollar prop is carrying a variable or is carrying a value, and I'm actually seeing if the class has that class as a property of that value. Now let's actually print what the property is. Okay, we are taking the property and printing it out, and remember the value of this property is going to be replaced here, right? And then we are going to say that if that value exists in this list, only then would we get that property, because that is what we are checking. The reason for that is, what are we replacing the getter from? We would have, if we wouldn't have the getter, would actually say get name, right? Then we would have get age, and then I gave you an example of 1500 function 1500 properties and 70% of them being protected. At that point we'll have to come up with, what is it, 1200 getter functions, which is not right. And since we are smart people, we are going to use the magic method. Okay, in the magic method all we will do is just pass in the property name, and we'll actually see if the property exists in the class. Okay, so let me quickly show you all what is the property that I'm sending in here. I'll go back and I'll refresh. So it's not refreshing. So why wouldn't it refresh? Oh, it did refresh. It looks like it's not going to print anything. I wonder why. Access specifiers. Doesn't look like it is going to print anything. See, it's interesting. Dollar underscore get doesn't print. Um, oh, it's not dollar underscore get. Wait, it's underscore get. PHP doesn't print. See, I cannot figure out why it is not printing the property, but I can tell you that when we send in the date, okay, it is actually sending the date as a as dollar property in here, and then it would say, and then it would actually replace the date or like the property like this. Okay, here, so this is the first step, right? Dollar property, then dollar property that we are sending in is going to be dollar this date, because the reason that it is replaced is dollar property is equal to date. That is why it is going to replace the one over here. Okay, so that is the way dollar underscore like underscore get works. Nirajan, did I answer that question? Okay, perfect. Now, so that is how we would actually use dollar or like underscore get. There is another method, okay, called function underscore set, where we given the property and we given the value. Okay, but I wouldn't actually use dollar underscore set at any point. The simple reason for that being, you actually are opening up your protected and private properties to the external world, because what would stop a hacker from setting in the name and the age, right? Because that is the whole concept of setting them protected. So do not do this. Okay, do not really use underscore set. If you just want to set the data, you can actually use this, where you would say access object of date is equal to something different. Diff oh man, I can't spell this. Okay, and if I actually print this out, okay, let me add a line break. Okay, over here. Oh, okay, over here. See, at that point, it is going to override it. The reason for that is simple, because we are setting date as a public property. But if we try to do the same thing for age, it is going to spit a bad message or like a fatal error. The reason for that is it is protected. See, age here is protected. That's why it is going to spit a bad message. See, we cannot do that for age. But if we actually go in and add the setter, it is going to override it, or like it is going to open our protected properties to the external world. So if somebody asks you why shouldn't you use setters or what is your problem with setters, the first thing that has to pop up in your mind is going to be this thing. Okay. Okay, so now let's actually do a quick refresh and see what happens here. See, hang on. Oh yeah, age. So let me actually print the age here and age here. And remember, age is a protected property, and only because we are giving in the setter, we are able to modify it. See, so it is of high importance for you all to understand why not to use this. Okay, okay. So at this point, let me ask you if there are any questions with whatever we have covered until now. Okay. No, can we please take a small break? Perfect. I was actually going to tell you all that now that it's 1.5 hours into the session, let's take a small break. Let's probably get back in like 10-15 minutes. Okay. Okay, guys, are you all back?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, so Munjar and Pooja here. Nirajan, are you back? Just probably wait like a minute or so for Nirajan to get back. In the meantime, again, let me double check if there are any questions with whatever we have done till now.
Uh, Not a question, Sai, but I do have a thing to tell you. The September 20th weekend,
Okay,
like 4 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now,
okay,
I can't attend the class, Sai, because it's my son's birthday and having a party for him, and everybody's coming from outside
okay,
the country and from outside states.
okay,
So that whole weekend I won't be able to attend the class.
okay. So when is that?
September
September.
21st weekend.
Okay, so it'll be 21st and 22nd.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we'll work something out for that day, like that
Okay.
weekend.
Thank you very much.
So, um, looks like we can take that off. It helps. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah. There is a lot of time. Okay, it's almost like a month from now. Yeah. So let's actually get there when we get there. For now, let's actually yeah, so access specifiers, we've done access specifiers. Yeah, so what we've done till now, we have done till now what is something called a very basic idea, okay, of access specifiers. But again, I was talking about due diligence just a while back. If anybody wants to do due diligence as to what kind of properties do we have, okay, the way that we would do that, okay. So now we are actually delving a little deeper into the whole concept of utilizing the functions that are available. Okay, so the due diligence that I was talking about is, how about us thinking about a wrapper, okay, or a way or a function call, keep it simple, of saying that okay, I'll actually pass in this class name or this object, and I want a list of all the variables. Okay, so that will actually tell us what are all the accessible properties, right? So the way we would do that is by a function called get class vars. Okay, okay. So what get class vars? So let me actually pull up documentation. So we get class. So the autocomplete stopped working. Perfect. Oh, okay. So perfect. So this one, the description is clear, right? It is saying that get the default properties of the class. Okay, so default properties, again, they are pretty much the what is it, they're pretty much how do I explain, they're pretty much the public properties. So protected and private properties, they wouldn't show up. If you want to look at protected and private properties, we can actually get those two. The way we would do that is by concept of reflection, and we are like far off from reflection, so let's not even think about it. But it's good to keep in mind that there is some way to get all kinds of properties, okay, which are both public and which are not public. For now, if we want to get the properties, okay, if you want to get the uh, class properties which are public, the way we do that is via get class vars. Okay, so now what get class vars, okay, so let's see what does it return. Okay, it actually returns an associative array, okay, of the declared properties visible from the current scope with their default value. Okay, if there is a default value or a current value that is set, it would even give us that value. Okay, but again, the main takeaway from this one has to be that it is an array. Okay, so how do we handle arrays? We would actually say print underscore r, right? And we would have to give in the function name get class vars, get class vars, and then what would we do? We would say, see again, get class vars takes the class name, so we'll have to, we're kind of forced to give the class name here. Okay, now think about this case. See, this is a long shot from here, but I want you all to imagine we are working with multiple classes. Okay, and and okay, so I actually have this function, okay, and function x, and it is actually taking an object. Okay, when I'm actually taking an object which is similar to this one, okay, I have no clue what this object is or what the class name is. So I want a way to find the class name at runtime when I have the object, right? I cannot always give in the class name statically. I have to find a way to make it dynamic, okay, at runtime. And again, don't worry, there is a wrapper for that one too, or a function. All we would do is we would say get class, and we would pass in the object that we have on hand, okay, which is access object. Okay, now, okay, if we go back, see, uh, we can actually close this data up, okay, and then we can do this. Oops, undefined variable. Oh yeah, right. See, that's a problem. I shouldn't have closed this, but I should have closed it till here. Okay, so now let's actually go back in here. See, at that point, it is giving me the only public property that is available. Do you all see? Here, date is the only public property. Okay, and when I'm saying give me the class variables, okay, of this class, okay, at that point, it is giving me the only public variable. So, if we want to do any fancy thing, okay, inside say like the setter, where we would say that you can return the property, okay, but you can only set, I don't know, just the public properties. Okay, at that point we can always what is it, use this list to perform any kind of operations. So did you all, can I take it that you all have understood the concept of get class vars and get class? I'll take the silence as yes and move on. Now, so what we have done here, okay, so let's actually take a look at the class. Okay, so what we have done in the class here is we've actually what is it, yeah, so we've actually talked about a constructor, we have talked about properties, we have talked about functions or methods, and then we have also talked about public properties, protected properties, and unprotected properties, right? Now the question can be, see, we have protected properties, but if we cannot use them, or if I tell you not to use the setter function to not set those protected properties, the question can be, what is the whole deal with protected properties and private properties, right? Because if we really cannot do anything with them, what is the whole concept of it? So here comes the solution for it. The solution for it is inheritance. Okay, inheritance. So now inheritance, let me go back to Shrib for a second. So see, we are done with encapsulation, or we have at least introduced ourselves to encapsulation. Let's look at inheritance for a second. Inheritance is going to be uh, yeah, inheritance is going to be, again, like the name suggests, you are inheriting something from the parent. Okay, the parent would pass on their functionality over to the child, okay, or children, or whatever, okay, and then the children are going to pass it on to their children, and so on. Okay, so let's actually take a quick look at an example with inheritance. Okay, let's say inheritance.php. Again, we'll open up a class on open up PHP tags class. Let's call it base class. Let's make it as clear as possible. Oh, you know what? I'll actually give you all the common example of animal, dog, and cat. Animal, okay. Uh, let's say, yeah, let's say public dollar name. Okay. See, everybody likes their pets, right? And they would give the pet a name. Then, okay, but see, the names can be variables. Anybody can give anybody any name. See, I can actually name a cat, I don't know, Billy, or I could even name a cat as Rookie or whatever I want. But a cat is always a cat. You cannot really say that it is something all different or something magical or anything of that sort. So, you wouldn't want the users to take upon the responsibility of determining the type. Okay, so that's why we would say we are going to make the variable protected and not allow the users to screw with it. Okay, then function underscore construct. Okay, so see, again, this is going to be the initializer. So almost all the classes that you all have would have this constructor. And then I would just say, so again, just like variables, even functions can be protected. So say protected function, and normally it's a convention to actually begin a protected function with an underscore. I don't know, I'll just call it talk for now. Okay, and then I'm saying echo, I don't know, talk. I guess that's enough. Now let's actually go to the child class, because that is what we're interested in. The child is going to be a dog class, and the way we would actually uh, extend or inherit a class is going to be via the extends keyword. Extends animal, and in here the good thing about uh, protected variables is protected variables are always going to be visible in the child classes. Okay, and the last one, now that we are here, let's actually call it private dollar date. Okay, so date here is today's date. Okay, irrespective of which animal it is, an animal or its owner should never be able to determine today's date. So we are saying we are setting it directly, and the magic of private keyword is, if we say that a variable or a function is private, the private function is only available, or the private variable or property is only available in that class, while or whereas a protected function or protected variable is always available in that class and all the child classes. Okay, so that's why we are saying that today's date cannot be changed by any class, and or cannot be changed by any, shouldn't be changed by anybody, irrespective of it being child or anybody. Okay, so ymd again. Okay, now this is done here. Now here what we would do is, so we can actually set the name and do whatever we want, but here in the constructor we are saying that, oh, there is a way to import the parent constructor. I guess it's parent underscore construct. So we would always say that we are getting the information from the parent. Let me double check. Inheritance. Inheritance. PHP. See, these examples that we have are pretty complex. So they are already talking about data abstraction and all that fun stuff. Let me just print this out and see if I find any. Yeah, yeah, it is the right one. Okay, so I'm actually calling in the parent constructor here. Okay, and then I'm saying that dollar this of type is a dog. Okay, and then I'm actually setting that this type of dog, and then I'm saying echo this is a dog, and then I'm actually going to reuse the above function that was created where I would say talk. Okay, and at that point let's not make it protected, let's make it public. I'm trying to wonder why did I make this protected. Go talk, this is going to be public because we'll have to access it from the object. So echo talk, this is going to say I bark, or let's say woof woof. Okay, and then let's take a cat extended from the animal again, and then the constructor, and again we could even do this where we would say underscore get dollar property, mm, return dollar this dollar prop. Okay, and I'll actually return the type. Okay, because I'm actually setting the type as a dog, so I should have copied the one from top. So yeah, let me remove this because I'll just be doing the same. This guy is going to be a cat. It's a cat meow. Okay. Now let's create three objects. The first object is for animal, new animal. Okay. And what does the animal have? Talk. Okay. So let's say, what does talk do? Does it? It just echoes. So we can just do echo dollar animal talk. Okay. Now let's actually copy this and paste it. Let's call it a dog, but this time it is going to be from the child class dog. And for now, let's just print these two and see what happens here. Okay. And see, there is another way. I mean, rather than like getting it on the web page, if you all want to verify something from the command line, as in the syntax. Okay, because we are working with big files here, so there might be syntax errors. The way we find if there is syntax error in the file or not is via via command line, is via this command, which is php -l inheritance.php, and at that point it says that okay, there are no syntax errors, which is good. Now let's go in and refresh and see if there are any runtime errors or if it works. This is going to be inheritance.php, inheritance.php. Okay, so there is a function. Okay, new animal or animal. Okay, it is new animal. Nirajan, what was your question? With brackets. See, I mean, you can actually do either. Okay, the reason. Okay, so I'll actually get to that question. That's a nice question. I'll get to that question in like 1 minute. Well, let's actually figure out why am I getting an error. This function talk call to undefined function talk on line 60. So okay, okay, perfect. See, I cannot do that, and I'll also have a line break just to verify that everything is fine. Okay, so the first thing that we did is talk, because we are printing the data for an animal, and then we are initializing the object for a dog, and in the constructor, if you all remember, we have the string saying that this is a dog, and we are printing when we say that give us the way that a dog talks, it's saying woof woof. Okay, so the next part though is the question that Nirajan has asked. The question that he has is, let me comment everything out and I'll actually put his question here. The question that he has is, if I initialize an object or instantiate an object, should it be this way or should it be that way? So let's actually print what happens in both cases and see what happens. And also at the same time, let's also say dollar animal talk, dollar animal talk. Okay, and also add a line break. See, it is a subtle difference. If anybody hasn't noticed, I do not have my brackets here and I have my brackets here. Okay, very subtle difference. Here, let's actually check if there are any PHP errors. So the first good thing is that there are no PHP errors, which means that there is At least syntactically, there is no difference between these two guys. Okay, now let's go onto the page and let's refresh it, and both of them are giving me talk. Okay, so the question that Nirajan has is, what exactly is the is the what is the whole deal? What is the difference between animal without brackets and animal with brackets? If there are no, if the class is not expecting any parameters in the constructor, at that point this is fine. But most of the times constructors expect parameters. So what I would normally do is go with this functionality. At least I'm when I'm working with like complex classes, it there might not be a chance where they are expecting something. So I would open up the brackets. Okay, so one example for that would be where I would say construct, I don't know, I would just say $x, and I'm just going to print $x. And since I have added it to the constructor, I'll have to add it to all these constructors. $x, $x, and $x. Oops, $x. Okay. At this point, if I actually say that, okay, the second one is going to work fine, but the first one is going to fail. Let's try that real quick. Oh, it doesn't. So I don't think it's a syntactical error. Probably it's a runtime error. So let's actually see, because this one's a required parameter. So I think, I mean, it has to break. Yeah, perfect. So it is a runtime error. Nice. So again, let's actually uh, add a few line breaks so we see what is happening. Yeah. So here on line 64, okay, it is saying that animal constructor is called. Okay, the constructor is missing argument 1. Okay, so if there are any arguments at that point, we will have to go this route. Okay, Nirajan, does that answer your question? Yes. So let me actually get back to uh, okay, so what we have here is the animal is the yeah, and before we go any further, let's actually copy this guy, paste, and call it a cat, and let's make the cat talk. And again, let's do this. No syntax errors, that is nice. Let's see if there are any runtime errors. No runtime errors. Okay, then we initialize the object for animal. It says it talks. Then we initialize the object for a dog. So the constructor says that this is a dog, and then when we get the talk, it says woof woof. After that, we are initializing the or instantiating the object for a cat, that says that it is a cat. And then when we initialize or like invoke the talk method, it says it does a meow. Okay, so this is the basic idea of inheritance. Does anybody have any questions here? Anybody? Any questions?
I have one question about the constructor.
Yeah.
Uh, we have defined the constructor on the class animal.
Mhm.
And why is it not showing on the browser?
Why is not
Why
showing
is
up
not
on the
showing up on
browser?
the
We have,
we
right?
have, right?
Yeah.
No, on the browser,
Okay, on the browser.
okay, the browser.
What is not showing
What
up?
is not showing up? The constructor, the
What do you mean by
date.
that?
What do you
The
mean?
date?
What is our purpose of using that constructor?
Okay, so let's
Okay,
actually
so
take
let's
a look
actually
at
take
the
a look at the.
constructor that we have. So what do we have in the constructor? So all that we are doing in here is we are setting the date, but we are not really getting the date, right? If that is the question. So let's actually start by getting the date also. Okay. Let's just say echo dollar this date, and let's put in a break line. Okay. Let's actually quickly check if there are any errors. There are no errors. And then let's go in here and let's print. At that point, it starts printing data. See, before we were just setting data, we were not getting data. Okay, we were before we were doing this only. So that is why nothing was printing out. And the reason that I was showing it in here was to say that a private property has to be set only inside the animal class. It cannot be accessed via child classes. While a protected property can we can actually what is it? We can actually get the protected property via the child class. And just to quickly double check, now that we are here, let's also echo the type. Okay, let's say echo what's it dog type, and let's get this method or like this line from the constructor. Okay, let's get this out, and since we have the get working, we should be able to get the data out. Okay, so I'm replacing the static text. Okay, and when we print it out, let me also put this guy for the cat, and let me put it mm, right here. Okay, yeah, that should be good enough. So now let's actually go back and refresh the page, or let me do this ddp, and I'll have to replace this with the cat object. Okay, then let me go to the browser and let's see what happens. So it is printing the type. Okay, and this type, where is it coming from? It is being set in the constructor. Okay, but now let's actually get a little more, I don't know, innovative, and let's say the date is some date in dog years. Okay, let's see what happens. Given that the date is private, okay, if we access the date property in a child class, let's see what happens. Nothing happens. That's interesting. Hmm, how would we see, the next question is going to be, how would we verify that this date, okay, is the same property as this one? Hmm, so another way is to probably say, hmm, well, let's actually say dollar dog echo dollar dog date. Let's see, oops, what happens here. So the thing that I can guarantee is that this is not the same property as this date. Okay, the date here is going to be a property of dog and not of animal. Now the next question is going to be, how can we prove it that the date that is coming through is a property of dog and not animal, right? So let's actually take a quick look. So there are no syntax errors. Let's go in here, refresh it. Perfect. Now let's do get class vars as one, but since this is protected, what can we do? uh, okay, so let's actually do a var dump to begin with on dog. Okay, let's see if date is part of class dog. So here, okay, over here, interesting. So let's actually do a echo pre so that everything, and actually let's also exit here. And let's do echo pre. Okay, here the most important thing that we'll have to take a look at is there are two dates here, and when I said that that echo that date cannot be overridden. Okay, here we actually can see that there are two date properties, one which is of class dog, and then there is another date which is of animal, and since that is private we can never override it. Okay, so we can create a new property altogether, but we can never what is it, override the property from the parent class. Okay, Nirajan, does it answer your question? Was it Nirajan or Munjal? I kind of forget or forgot. Whose question was it?
I think it was Narajan's.
I get. Are you all still there? Did anybody doze off?
No, no, I'm still here, sorry.
See, object-oriented programming kind of can get a little long. So grab a cup of coffee, but stay awake. Now that we have an idea of how object-oriented programming works and how access specifiers work, okay, how and how inheritance works. Okay, let's. I mean, if there are no real questions, let's actually take a look at a few more functions. I do not want to get into the concepts of abstraction and all that craziness before you all even try this. See, I mean, again, abstraction is very simple. I'll give you a basic idea of what abstraction is. Abstract. So here, what we are saying is when we say that so what do we do with encapsulation? So that is the first thing that we'll have to understand. When we encapsulate something, okay, we are only taking the functions and we are putting them in a in an object in a class. We are actually functionally defining space for our functions. Okay, but with abstraction we actually take it one step further. With data abstraction we have two concepts. One of them is abstract classes, the other one would be interfaces. Okay, so in real time programming or in like web programming, whenever I'm actually writing a class or whenever I'm writing code, mainly for APIs, okay, mainly for APIs, this would only be for APIs, okay, and you all might seldom work on APIs because, I mean, unless you work for a company which generates APIs, okay. So abstraction would have abstract classes or interfaces. Oh no, not into or not or and, okay. What these two do is they would say that, listen, I actually have 15 classes and each class has, say, variable number of methods, x number of methods or y number of methods. I am only going to give you the definition. If you want to use my classes, take a look at my class, take a look at the documentation, and take a look at the method name. But I am not allowing you to take a look at my code, okay. Like here, okay, like here, the code is all visible, and the code is normally considered to be an intellectual property of the company that you work for. And if a client of yours gets to see your code, that is going to be a big problem because they can actually take your code, use it for themselves, and do whatever they want, right? Because that is the whole reason why you're in business. So the way people would actually hide their code is via the methods of abstraction, like the name already suggests, okay. So we will go into it at a later point, but I want you all to work with classes, okay, the class properties and methods and all that magic first before we get into abstraction. Once you all understand what encapsulation is and what inheritance is, data or like class abstraction or interfaces are going to be a cakewalk, okay, trust me. All we will do is as an example interface, okay. Over here, all we will do, we would just say implements, okay, and we would give the interface name, and in the interface we would actually start with interface space I class name, okay, and we would give in the names of the functions. But again, before we get to that, I want you all to work on the classes, okay. So now the question would be, do you all want the data abstraction tomorrow, or do you all want the data abstraction after the refresher week, which would be next week, where you would go through whatever has already been completed, okay. So I'll let you all like decide if you all want data abstraction to be completed tomorrow, or not data abstraction again. So data abstraction is a different concept, this is going to be class abstraction, okay. So what do you all want for tomorrow? Do you all want me to start the refresher tomorrow, or do you all want the refresher from, yes it answers, okay.
It's up to you, Sai. Whatever you think is will be proper, we'll just
Yeah,
go with it.
okay. So see, I personally would say that given that you all haven't tried functions and all that stuff, I would rather, okay, so I would rather have you all start with the refresher from tomorrow, okay. And then once we are happy with the classes, that is when let us go into data abstraction. But again, see, data abstraction is very simple in terms of code. What is complex is understanding the business reason of why we would do that, okay. The simple business reason, as the name suggests again, is to keep the users away from the what is it, from the code, okay. Now let me ask you all, with the refresher course what do you all want, or with the refresher week what do you all want? So I'll actually, since Pooja has brought this up, let me begin with what she has done. Okay, she's already done with CSS, and she said that she needs some help with jQuery and anything after with PHP. So Nirajan and Munjal, what do you all want with the refresher? Do you all want the same thing, or do you all want something in addition, so that we can actually divide them for the next 1 week?
Actually, I am done with the CSS and all this stuff, so those are not really a problem with me. But yeah, as far as the PHP, I'm pretty sure the last couple sessions what we had, it might be having a difficulty for those, but I haven't covered yet by myself, so I cannot actually tell you like what exactly will be the difficulty for me.
Okay, so yeah, so Munjal, I mean, now that you have brought this up, let me tell you that the refresher course is going to be a place um, where I will actually give you all the task. Okay, not hard tasks, easy tasks. Okay, and this in itself is going to be a big plus for you all, where you all are pushed to work. Okay, I wouldn't say pushed, probably pushed is the wrong word, but you all have to work, which says that, okay, so as example, so jQuery for example. Okay, we'll begin with, I'll probably come up with a piece of HTML, and I'll actually send the HTML over to you all. Okay, during the session or before the session, all you all have to do is perform 6 or 7 operations, right? So that is pretty much like the is going to be a very good start. Okay, where you all have to use your selectors, where you all have to use, say, add a class, remove a class, and do all this kinds of fancy stuff. That's for jQuery. Then when we go to PHP, because what I think is, once you take a look at the errors, you will be able to figure it out. That is how easy PHP is. Okay, so that is my idea. So Nirajan, is there anything in specific that you want me to cover during the refresher? uh, Hello, Nirajan, you there? So you said that's a great idea. So that's a great idea for. So was that for like something different, or what was that for? Oh, classwork. Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's yeah. See, I'll pat myself on the back that, and I'll agree that it's a real good idea.
Um,
Yeah.
and can we start from like the next week, as I'm probably thinking to like go through all the stuff probably by tomorrow because I have right after when we get done with the class or something.
Yeah. So tomorrow, what do you? So what do you like? What do you want me to do tomorrow? Like, is there anything different that you want me to cover?
I mean, probably the
Not
next
cover anything.
thing, whatever you want.
Say it again?
Not cover anything tomorrow, I think.
See, Pooja, you sound like a backbencher, man.
Oh man, because the thing is, seriously, it's all overwhelming. Last two concepts I've not got a chance to revise.
Yeah, I
Then got
understand.
something else, and tomorrow again going back to something else. I don't know.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm actually
That's
it's
kind of
overwhelming.
scary.
That's the problem. It's my brain is like, oh my god.
I understand.
I've sat at home for
Yeah, it's
like
kind
one
of
and a half
scary.
years now. So yeah, so my brain is in a mode right now.
Yeah.
Excuse me for that.
Yeah. So yeah, let's not put any more pressure on anybody else. So let's say that tomorrow we'll actually begin with basic jQuery and basic CSS. Okay. And after that, on Tuesday and Thursday, Saturday and Sunday. Okay, these 4 days. So let me do this. Let me actually break them up into 5 days, and I'll actually send it over to you all. And I would strongly suggest that you all make it to those sessions. Okay, irrespective of you've tried it or not. The only reason for that is, I call this pressure programming. Okay, this the programming part, it might not be hard, but there is still some pressure where everybody else, be it me or be it your peers, are looking at you. Okay, That would also give you an idea of where you are at this point. And trust me again, this will happen when you get to work. Okay? When you get to your job, there would be cases where your manager would be right next to you, or your colleagues are right next to you. So it is better that you get embarrassed now and learn rather than getting embarrassed in front of your boss or your colleagues. Okay, see, I mean, trust me, when I say this, I'm not like trying to be a devil and like scare you, but trust me, this has actually happened with a lot of people. Okay, there are places where I've actually seen a colleague of mine not able to instantiate an array. Okay, that was a very sad day because I was actually right next to him and my boss was on the other side, so I wasn't even able to help that guy, the poor guy. And my boss was like surprised, saying that how did you clear the interview if you cannot instantiate the array? So so since I call this pressure programming, it is always good to have the pressure beforehand than when you're in the or when you're on the job. Okay, so I strongly suggest that you attend all the sessions. Okay, but for tomorrow, let's cover CSS and jQuery. And from Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday and Sunday, let's cover PHP. So do you all
Okay.
agree for that?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Nirajan and
Yeah.
Munjal. Okay, Munjal agrees. So Nirajan, yes, you agree too. Perfect. So now it's almost 3:40. Let me ask you all, if there are no questions, let's actually end the session here. Given that we've completed the classes and inheritance, only if there are no questions. So
I'm good, Sai.
yeah, I'll take the silence as no questions. Let's call it a day at this point, and let's regroup tomorrow for sure. And let's
Okay.
start working on the exercises. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. See you all tomorrow at 1 p.m. EST.
Thank you. Thanks, Sai, for considering my request, and this will really help, I hope.
Yes, it'll help everybody. Trust me,
Thank
it'll
you.
help everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Yep, bye.